Hello, everyone. We are about to get started. Today's topic, we are jumping into two, a smaller and a larger. When I say larger, I mean very, very large particle usages. We'll be talking about to and ga today. Unfortunately, we will not cover every instance of ga that there is. That's impossible. But we'll get through as much as we can. We'll start with the easier one, to. Now, as I just mentioned earlier before we started, and as you probably know, if you have questions, please just toss them out into the text channel. Even if I'm talking, you don't have to wait. There's no specific question time. Just toss them out if you have them, and we'll do our best, me or someone else, to answer them. So, to we have talked about before. And just as a quick review, does anyone remember the function that to took the last time we studied it? It's probably the most common one. If you had to say what is the most common usage of to, it is this. What's the function of to? Anyone? Basically to connect nouns, yes. And with we haven't covered yet. We have covered and. And how do you use and? It's, you need two things to do it with. And so the and, which we've learned before, was, A told B, I like pizza and curry or whatever. And you need two things, to use that version of it. We're going to use the second one, which someone hinted at with one of their answers, which is with. And overwhelmingly, not 100%, but this is almost always used with people. It's so common that we're going to throw it here up and onto the page and say, we're going to talk about person plus to. And in doing that, let me show you a couple of sentences that look almost exactly the same, but they're actually a little bit different. So I'm going to read these for you. The top one first, and then the second one. First one goes, 私と友達は映画を見ました. Now this is using the one that we've studied before. You can see that there's two nouns, one on either side of to. There's our A, to, B structure. And we're saying a friend and I, or some friends and I'm not sure if it's plural or not, a friend and I saw a movie. If you want to step back and look at it in a different way, watashi to tomodachi, that's acting as a single unit. It's a single unit being marked as the topic of the sentence. Watashi to tomodachi wa eiga o mimashita. And this is the same usage that if we were to say something like eiga to terebi o mimashita. I watched a movie and TV. So this is not this is not new. This is what we've done already. Now you're going to look at the second sentence, and it's going to look almost exactly the same. It just looks like it's a little bit different. The wa and the to have been switched. And let me read it for you. Watashi wa tomodachi to eiga o mimashita. And on its face, it just looks like the particles have been switched. And you might say, well, who cares? What's the difference here? Now, it's important to note that these two sentences are both describing the same event happening. In both of these sentences, we're talking about I, the speaker, and their friend or friends seeing a movie. The only difference here is the emphasis on the elements within the sentence. But as far as what reality are we describing? We're describing the same exact thing. There's no difference in, for example, who watched more, or who was watching more intently, or where they were sitting. It's the same between the two sentences. However, let's look at, the topic. And with the topic, comparing the first and the second sentence, the first one has two things in the topic. And the topic is typically the most important part of the sentence. That's why it's the topic. We're throwing it at the front to say, this is what we're talking about. This is what's important. So note that in the second sentence, the topic is just watashi. So I probably gave you the answer, but think to yourself, which sentence treats the two people, well, let's assume that tomodachi is a single person, which sentence treats the two people with equal importance, and which sentence treats them with different levels of importance? I see a few people typing. I'll let them throw their answers out. Which one says I and my friend are equally important? Now we'll define what important means in the sense of, how I'm describing it. So I see 3 people. I love it. They have 3 different ways of writing it, and they all mean the same thing. The first one, when you put watashi to tomodachi wa, you're putting them at the same level of importance. However, with the second sentence, watashi is the most important person in that sentence. It doesn't mean that you don't care about your friend. We're not talking about the important people in your life. It's not that. It is importance in the sense of which person is more important in the context of the conversation. Now that seems a bit vague, so let's talk about that a little bit more. In the second sentence, we are now saying, let me reread them in English. The first sentence would be, my friend and I saw a movie. Second sentence in English, I saw a movie with my friend. So to is acting as with here. Note how even in English, with my friend is way at the end of the sentence. And in English as well, we are showing that there's less emphasis, less importance placed on with my friend. The main part of that sentence is I seeing that movie. Oh yeah, and there was a friend, that was with me. And so why? Why would we say that? How would this come up differently? And for example, let me give you a few examples to describe, because when we have sentences in Japanese and most languages, but especially Japanese, looking at a single sentence, there's no context. There's no sentence that came before it or came after it to see the larger conversation, unless you are looking at a dialogue. And here, let's think of 2 questions. The first question, someone asks you, and I'm going to ask it in English. I'm going to say, and then Japanese. Someone says, say your mother. Your mother said, what did you do yesterday? What did you do yesterday? And you say, kino wa nani o shimashita ka? What did you do yesterday? And you answer with the first sentence. My friend and I, or excuse me, sorry, I'm getting it backwards in my head. Let me take 10 seconds, clear my brain, and I'll start over again. Sorry about that. Okay, your mother says, what did you see yesterday? Okay, I'm good now. Or now, what did you see? What did you do? What did you do yesterday? I promise I'm awake. Just a bit fuzzy in my brain. What did you do yesterday? And the sentence that's in green, you respond with that. You say, watashi wa tomodachi to eiga o mimashita. Now, why are you more important? Why did you choose to single out yourself as the topic here? Well, your mother said, what did you do yesterday? She's not asking about you and your friends. She's asking about you. So that's what I mean by importance. It's not you're more important than the other person. It's in the context of the conversation. The person asking you is asking about you. You're the focus. And so if mother says, kino wa nani o shimashita ka? You might respond. You could actually respond with both, but you might respond with, 私は友達と映画を見ました。I saw a movie with my friend. Now, let's think about how we could use the first sentence. In which situation would your friend be of equal importance? Different question. You say, I saw a movie. And then your mother says, well, wait, who did you see a movie with? And you say, oh, I saw, my friends and I saw a movie. You could use the first sentence. Or a bit more clearly, you might say, oh, or your mother might say, what did you do yesterday? And you say, oh, I was with my friends. I played with my friends. And then your mother says, well, what did you do? And you might say, 私と友達は映画を見ました。One more example. Teacher says, what did you do yesterday? Or teacher says, who watched a movie? 誰が映画を見ましたか? Or, sorry, 昨日は誰が映画を見ましたか? Who watched the movie yesterday? And you raise your hand because you've got this sentence. You saw it on Renju and you're like, I can use this. You raise your hand and you say, 私と友達は映画を見ました. My friend and I watched a movie. In this sense, the teacher was saying, who watched a movie yesterday? The emphasis is on who did the watching. And you're answering with emphasizing the who. 私と友達は. The second sentence has a bit more emphasis on you, singular, and the action that you're doing. And your friend watching it with you is just something added on the end. So the first one might be more appropriate for a question asking about the who. The second might be more appropriate for asking about the what. Now, with that being said, these are interchangeable. Like I said, they're both describing the same action that took place. So it's just a slight nuance change between these two sentences. It's a useful one, but it's a slight change. So at the end of this, you might say this and tomorrow you might have a chance to use it. You're like, I don't remember which one to use. Should I use wa and then to afterwards, or should I use to, and then before the particle, before the topic particle? In the end, it's not going to matter. It doesn't make so much of a difference that one is going to convey the wrong intention. Now that's just these two sentences. Let's take a look at a few more examples that might make a bit more sense as to how and when to use this. Let's look at a simple one. As you know, we often drop the subject when it's understood. And when is the subject most understood? When it's you speaking about yourself. The speaker talking about themselves. And so you might have a sentence like this. 先生と話します. And I will talk with the teacher. I will talk with the teacher. The I is understood. And in this one, it actually sounds a bit more different. I will talk with the teacher sounds a bit different than the teacher and I will talk. Doesn't it? And I'm going to type these out so you can see these next to each other. And the Discord, not the Discord, the screen share has the hiragana on it. So I'm going to stick with just, actually no, I'll stick with the hiragana. Okay, look at these two. The first one's the same as what's on the screen. The second one's a new one I just added. Sensei to hanashimasu. Now this one sounds like you, now because don't forget, Watashi wa is in there. It's just you're not saying it. It's the understood part of the sentence. So I'm going to change it to that. So in parentheses, watashi wa sensei to hanashimasu. In that one, like we said before, the topic is a bit more important. So who do you think is going to be a bit more of the speaker in this conversation? If you say sensei to hanashimasu, it sounds like you, the speaker, is. For example, I'm concerned about my grades. I need to speak to the teacher. So you go to the teacher and you say, oh, teacher, I'm really worried about my grades, blah, 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 blah. And you say a bunch of things. And then the teacher responds. You, the speaker, are in control of this conversation. So it makes sense to have you alone as the topic. And then the teacher is also part of the conversation. You are talking with them. But they're not number one, so to speak. The second sentence, which is only in the Discord panel, not on Renshu, watashi to sensei wa hanashimasu. This one sounds more like a give and take. Where if you had to guess, you would say they're both talking equally or generally equally. It's not necessarily I or the teacher going to the other one and saying, let's talk. It might be the teacher and I sitting at the table talking over lunch. And so there's more of a sense of equality in terms of who is taking charge of the action, if that makes sense. So the to, again, it does have a bit of a nuance to it that you can use to hint who is doing more of the action or who initiated the action, or they're both doing it, but who is more quote unquote important in the action. Importance always comes with the topic or the subject at the beginning. And then to can be used to show someone else that is doing the action. They are still doing the action, but they are not, again, quote, as important as the speaker. So this is the second usage of to. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to talk about this beyond this. And so we usually do practice, but I'm going to skip practice on this one. My apologies for that. Because we have our second topic today, which I'd love to spend. I could spend 3 hours talking about it. We only have 35 minutes. So let's jump into that one. But just keep in mind, to, when meaning with, is showing a lower level of importance or emphasis, but it is still used. I'm going to type it out one more time. It is used to mark someone, it's usually a person, because usually it's people that do actions. It's someone that is sharing the action. They are also doing the action with the topic or the subject. And overwhelmingly, not all particles are like this, but overwhelmingly it is translated as with. Okay, deep breath. Everyone relax. We're going to talk about ga for a little bit. And give me just 1 second before we continue. Thank you. I have a big cup of coffee in front of me, and I definitely need coffee for this. Now, before we start actually talking about, I need to tell you a few things that hopefully will help you set your mind straight. And a lot of this is collected information that I've picked up I've lived in Japan for over 15 years, studied for 20, and I can't necessarily point you to this specific resource to back up what I'm going to say, but I hope you believe that this is my collection of knowledge and experiences with this. Number one, ga is hard. Ga is hard because there is no single way to describe Ga and cover all the usages of it. It's simply not possible. I feel that anyone that tells you otherwise is ignoring so many not just edge cases, not small, unique, rare situations, but large usages of Ga. I would posit that a Japanese native speaker who is a Japanese language teacher, would not be able to give you a concise meaning or usage of Ga. It's because there isn't one. Languages are not made by committee in most situations, and Ga has over time come to encompass, a huge number of usages. And to give you a few examples of things I've picked up over time, I've actually gotten into arguments with people over this. People that said, "Oh, Ga is so simple, you just need to do this." And every time I've seen that expressed, I've immediately been able to think of usages of Ga, common usages that don't fit into that model. I had someone tell me one time, "Oh, Ga is simple. I just read this book and it explained it all to me." And I happened to have the book. I popped it open. It was a 20-page chapter on Ga, and it still didn't cover some of the most common usages. There is a Renshu user. I'm not sure if they're still a user, but Renshu's been around for a long time. A user I've spoken to in the past, whose wife is a Japanese native speaker, and they did their PhD on Ga. And if you're familiar with like a PhD dissertation, they're long, as in they're tens and usually hundreds of pages, depending on the topic, and the content. On Ga, on this single character of Ga. And it's just not something that's meant to be broken down into a simple setup. So, are we all doomed? No, it's not. It's not that we're faced with an impossible task. It's that there's a couple of mindsets I feel you can give yourself that will make it much more reasonable to approach Ga. And one of them is that, and I've said this so many times with particles in general, it's good to look at Japanese often as patterns. And you see patterns. It might be a sentence pattern. And to give you the most simple example of a sentence pattern, when we first start here in our Renshu lessons, the very first pattern we learned was A wa bi desu. This is common in so many textbooks. And when we did that, we didn't talk about what des is. We didn't talk about what wa is. We said, this is a pattern that you can use to say, A is B. Let me give you an example with Ga. And in fact, I believe it's on the next panel. Yes. When we learned about ski, kirai, and hoshi, we would say things like this. We'd say things like kare ga suki desu. I love curry. Kare ga suki desu. And again, we didn't really talk about why we use Ga there. We said, hey, this is a pattern for you to take and put into your knowledge bank. You can put noun ga suki desu and say, I like this, or I want this, or I hate this. And instead of focusing too much mental bandwidth on breaking down and analyzing each piece of the sentence, it's much easier to take Ga or anything and apply the pattern and say, oh, I can use this in this situation. When I'm trying to express this thought, when I'm in a polite situation, when I'm asking someone for help, I use this or I use that. And so I think approaching most particles with the idea of pattern usage and when do I use this, it's going to make it a lot easier than trying to say, I need to understand each piece of it individually on an atomic level. It's not impossible, but it leads to a lot more time sunk into that. And as someone pointed out, yes, you actually can say kare wa suki desu. And that works as well. I'm not sure if we'll be able to talk about that later on. There's actually a topic in the Renshu forums I put up some time ago that talks about that exact thing, the wa and ga switching. And I'll point that out at the end of our lesson for you to read if you want. So, number one is look at these elements as patterns. Try not to break it down too much, but look at them as patterns. Number two, if you don't know otherwise, this is what a lot of people I hear talk about. And this is something we're going to use here in Renshu in just a couple of minutes. Is ga and other things, we can talk about common, I'm going to say patterns, or you can say rules that apply to a large number of usages. So that we're going to talk about some patterns that say, okay, this way of thinking about ga helps you understand a lot of different ways that ga is used. Does it cover everything? No. But until you get more of those patterns, I mean, even me, I cannot say personally that I have a deep and thorough understanding of ga. However, I can use ga quite effectively because I've gathered enough of those patterns, sentence patterns, usage patterns into my brain over the years to say, oh, in this situation, I use ga. In that situation, I don't use ga. And you'll get there to where you'll never need to think about it in the future. But until then, these general rules, this works most of the time. They can be very helpful. The important thing is to remember that there's always exceptions to the rule. And with ga, there are large exceptions. So don't take any rule that you hear someone say and say, oh, this is the rule. More accurately, this is a model for understanding ga that will make it easier to understand it most of the time. It's fuzzy, it's not exact, but it'll help get you closer until you get more of those patterns into your head. Someone mentioned a few messages up in the Discord that they think of ga as making the thing before it in italics. That's not right completely, but it's also not wrong completely. And that's one way to help bring you closer to a better understanding of ga. And so I would see that as a valuable statement, as one that helps you, understand it. So let's jump in to what Renshu talks about. Now, often, ga is described in textbooks as the subject marker. They say wa is the topic marker and ga is the subject marker. And of course, that leads you to think, what does that mean? And even as a subject marker, I don't feel like that's necessarily the best way to think about it, because we subjects have a very explicit and clear meaning in English. And presumably other languages as well. I don't speak other languages, just these two. But in English, subject means this and nothing else. It's this one thing in the sentence. However, it means subject is more fluid in Japanese. And so we say subject, but also don't hold on to this word too much because you'll get, jammed into a certain usage of it that doesn't always work out. So, but let's talk about these two differences. 日本語は面白いです。日本語が面白いです。A topic is, generally speaking, used, and let me jump, there we go, is generally used to introduce what we're going to talk about. It's like, it's like the sign being held up before something begins saying, this is what's coming up. It's, it's your menu. It's your menu for the conversation. Wa is saying, hey, this is coming up. I'm about to talk about this. And sometimes you see wa very literally translated as for something something. So as for Japanese, it's interesting. Now, we don't say that usually in natural English, so we don't typically translate it that way. But you can see that when we say as for, we are making it very clear saying, this is what's about to be talked about. And then you start talking about it. Nihongo wa omoshiroi desu. With this sentence, there's no underlying emphasis or nuance or anything. It's a very simple statement. Japanese is interesting. Now, there's actually a second usage of wa that we're not going to talk about today, but let's just focus on this topic usage of it. Now, someone else mentioned, I'm going to type it out one more time because it's a bit higher in the conversation. And I say this with, I think, every idea that's used to try and simplify ga. I both agree and disagree with this because it's useful in some times, not useful in other times. But you often hear ga being described as a way to emphasize something in the sentence. And that is also true and not true, because there's lots of other ways to emphasize things in Japanese, and you cannot just say, I want to emphasize this, therefore I'm putting the ga on it. It doesn't work that way. However, what is underneath that statement, ga is used to emphasize it, just in the same way that italics are used to emphasize something in a sentence, or sometimes it's bold. Ga is often used, this is one of the key usages of it. Doesn't cover everything, but one of the things that you see most often, it is used when presenting new information. What does new mean? New means new in the sense of that the information that's being presented is new to someone that's listening or reading. You know, we talk about conversations. So I usually say speaking and listening. But of course, you can take in Japanese language, you know, through text, through paper and whatnot. So if I'm saying Nihongo ga omoshiroi desu, that ga, again, those italics, it's like an arrow pointing to that word. It's saying, hey, I'm telling you the Japanese is interesting. And since we're talking about interesting, that's subjective. So it's probably the speaker's, you know, thought, their thought about it, their personal, you know, their personal opinion. But they're saying this because they probably haven't mentioned this to anyone before. So when would this come up? This would come up, and we're going to see this again in a few minutes, as an answer to a question. You see ga appearing in answers to questions so often because what are questions? They're often a way to get new information from someone else. Otherwise, why ask? Generally speaking, a question, you're asking someone to get that information because you don't have it yet. And so ga is used to say, hey, I'm giving you this new information. Here's a ga to help focus you in on that. So that's where the emphasis comes in. People say it emphasizes it. People say there's italics used here because you're emphasizing it. And it's not emphasizing as in, you know, Japanese is interesting. You're not putting an extra punch to it. You're saying this information is a bit more important because it's new to you, presumably. Ga is used to mark these new chunks of information. And of course, you want the listener or whoever's reading or hearing your Japanese to focus on the new information. That's a good question. And I'm not going to answer because it'll come up in the next couple of panels. So I'm talking about giving information right now. in a sense, it can be used for receiving, and we'll see it in just a sec. But no, excellent question. And I love questions. But you often see it in delivering information because, you're giving something new to someone. Let's step back for just a second and look at the sentence that's just above us. If you say Nihongo wa omoshiroi desu, it sounds like there's a few different things that could be going on, but it sounds like you're saying, oh, Japanese is interesting, and this is already knowledge that the other people have that you think that. Or you're saying something that's generally understood. Maybe it's us. It's us, a bunch of Japanese learners on Discord. And if I say, Nihongo wa omoshiroi desu, then I'm speaking with the knowledge that you all probably think the same thing. Like, this isn't new to you. You probably think Japanese is interesting. And so that's why you're here, is to learn Japanese. And there are other usages of the wa here, but we're going to focus on just that one. 1 second. Excuse me. Ga, again, can be seen as emphasizing it because it's giving you that new information. Now, this kind of ties in with what that person was asking. It can also be used in questions, and you hear this a lot. In fact, you cannot say this. This sentence is, and I don't, if someone else wants to mark the Kalchan no emote on it, I would appreciate that. This is not a good sentence. Nani wa suki desu ka? You can't say that. It just doesn't work. The one that's on the screen, though, and I'm going to jump down to the second sentence since that one's on the screen. That one works. Nani ga suki desu ka? So why are we using ga here? What is the word what here? Nani? That's new. That's new information. Or rather put, it's information that you don't have yet. If I'm saying, oh, it's not ski. On the screen, it's oishi. Sorry, but let's go with ski. If I'm saying, what do you like? Do I know what you like? Probably not. At least in the context of the conversation, I don't know. So I'm asking you. So this nani is new or not present information. I'm trying to get it from you. Kind of in that sense, you can think of it as you are trying to receive information using ga. You are highlighting that ga is something that you don't have, that's new to you, so you're asking the other person. Of course, the other person probably knows what they like, so you're trying to get it out of them. In that sense, you can use it to receive information as well. What's on the screen right now may or may not work with you. To be honest, when I first read this sentence, I said, that doesn't jive with me, but I can see it working for a lot of people. And that is, and this came from a Japanese teacher, as in someone who teaches Japanese. You can think of ga as like filling in a blank on a worksheet. For example, with that first sentence, dare ga momo o tabemashita ka? Who ate the peach? You know that someone ate the peach. You just don't know who. So you're saying, hey, I've got this information I don't know. I need new information. I'm going to put a ga there to show you that. And say, this is empty. This is blank. Please put the information in there to fill that in. So ga is working in this sense to either show you new information or say, I want to put new information here. Gimme, gimme, gimme. The second sentence is similar. If you're saying, nani ga oishii desu ka? Let's think about that. Are you asking, is anything delicious or not? No. You are asking with the presumption that there are delicious things. I don't know, maybe we're at a restaurant. So you're at a restaurant, and who would you ask this to? If you were going with your friend and it was a new restaurant to both of you, you wouldn't ask this. because the other person doesn't have that information. However, if this other friend invited you there, and you're like, oh, this is your favorite restaurant, great, and in your head you're thinking, well, you must know what's good. Nani ga oishii desu ka? The oishii desu, something is delicious, that's known. You just don't know which one it is. You know which dish it is. And so you are saying, hey, I need you to fill in the blank here. I need you to take this nani and replace it with something new. So if you don't remember anything else today, remember this new concept. And like I said, there's an asterisk behind everything I say in today's lesson. This doesn't cover all usages of ga. I'm not even sure if it covers the majority of usages of ga, but it is a really good model that you can use to apply to a significant amount of the sentences with ga. Let's keep going. This is a pattern that we've already used before. And when we learned this in Renshu, we said, don't worry about the ga. Just learn this as a pattern. And what was the pattern? The pattern was, ga aru or ga iru. We would say when you're talking about the presence of something, the existence of something, you use ga plus whichever verb is appropriate, aru or iru. Why? Why would we say that? So take the sentence in front of us. Ie ni neko ga imasu. Whoops, almost said arimasu. Maybe it's a robot neko. Ie ni neko ga imasu. Why say this? Why take the time out of our day to say this sentence? There's a cat in the house. Well, we're probably telling someone this because they don't know that yet. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to give them this new information. Aru and iru, when we're talking about the presence of things, we are often using that to give that information to someone. If they already knew that, if you told someone and it was their house, you walk into someone else's house and you tell them, you say, oh, there's a cat in your house. Well, they would say, yeah, I know. I live here. And that's not a common conversation. Instead, we use it for delivering new information. And this is usually the case. So let's keep thinking about that. Now, we can mix them up. We can have both of them in the same sentence. And remember, the wa is just saying, hey, we're going to talk about this. This is what's coming up. This is the menu of our conversation. Number one, we're going to talk about me. Watashi wa ie ni neko ga imasu. So, we do have the new information. I'm telling you, there's a cat in the house. And since we're talking about me, I'm presumably talking about my house. However, I am not new. I'm not a new element in this conversation. We're just saying, hey, we're going to talk about me. I'm here. You know me. I am I. But speaking about me, I've got a cat in the house, at my house. Watashi wa ie ni neko ga imasu. The me part is not new. I am not new information. I hope. You know me. I'm Michael. The fact that I have a cat, well, I wish I had a cat. We don't right now. It's killing my family that we don't have one, but we're in a rental house and they don't allow them. But if you're giving this new information, you would use ga because that's, that's the new part. It is because this that sometimes we see it translated this way. As for the topic, blah, 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 blah. So you could translate it and say, as for me, there's a cat at home or a cat at my house. But do we speak that way? No. So to the chagrin of a lot of learners, you will see this translated as I have a cat at home. or I have a cat at my house. And then they're counting the English words and they're counting the Japanese words and they're trying to draw lines between them and they're saying, these don't line up. These don't match with each other. And this is one of the reasons where I recommend you see it as a pattern and not trying to understand it in a piece by piece, breaking it up, parsing it into its individual elements. Wa is giving us a sign saying, hey, this is the topic, this is what we're talking about. Ga is saying, hey, here's some new information for you. Here's some stuff that you probably don't know. It'll help you out. I'll give you a few more examples and then we're going to wrap things up. And I will also point out hopefully, what'll be a very helpful topic inside of the Renshu forums that will help you kind of expand on this a bit. There are a few kind of compound adjectives that you have probably seen in your studies. And one of them is, for example, this one comes up a lot. Let me type it out for you because it's not on the page. Can anyone tell me what this means? Tega takai. Tall. Thank you. Tall specifically is in people. People are animals, not a building. Yeah. There's also on the screen, kami ga nagai, which is long hair, and you've also seen this one. Atama ga ii. Good head. A nice strong head. Smart, intelligent. And you hear these come up a lot. Now, don't forget, we're trying to focus today, at least, on ga as being a method for bringing in new information. So, this is not something you would say if you were talking to someone face to face, because they can see your hair. That would be a little strange. It would still make sense, but if you have long hair and you're looking at somebody and say, I have long hair, they'd say, yes, I can see that. Thank you for that information. Kimochi ga warui, or the shorter form, kimochi warui, sure. But this is used to present new information. Maybe you're describing yourself over text. Or if you say, Japanese students are smart, which, what does this mean? This is, I guess, self-congratulatory. We're talking about ourselves. This doesn't mean Japanese as in Japanese, the nationality. It means us, people that are studying Japanese. We're smart, I hope. It's good to be positive. But we are using this, again, to typically emphasis, italics or arrows or however you want to think of it, saying, hey, you should focus on this information because I, the speaker, I, the writer, believe it is new to you. And there's a ton, there are a couple more that have been tossed into the Discord. There are tons of examples of these gas popping up in these, I'm going to call them compound adjectives. So, are we done? Are we done with wa and ga? No, of course not. This is just a drop in the ocean that is, learning to swim in Japanese. However, if you hold on to this idea of ga being used to present new information, and it does that by emphasizing it with the ga, then it will help you a lot. And go back through this lesson and notice we only talked about a few specific sentence patterns. But take those patterns and now you can look at them again. Kare ga suki desu. And before, you just knew it as, let me type it out one more time. You can tell I really like curry. Kare ga suki desu. Before, you just learned it as, this is used to describe something you like. Now you can look at it and take that pattern and look at it a bit more deeply. And you say, well, I'm saying this with ga because this other person probably doesn't know that. Otherwise, I'm wasting their time by saying it. But real fast, let me grab the, before we wrap things up, and I really apologize. We don't have time for too many questions. It's a long topic. But let me grab the FAQ on it. And on top of it, this, and I like this because this particular link, I'm going to paste it in the Discord. I'm also going to jump to it inside of our Discord. But this is in the forums, and you can see up at the top of the page where to get to it. But this one talks more specifically about why are there two pairs of sentences? One uses wa, one uses ga. Which one's right? And I have some examples, and then there are other people that are talking about it as well, with disagreement as well. People seeing it in different examples, different ways of thinking about it. And I don't know if you can talk about ga in levels of JLPT, but you can't finish the N5 without being exposed to ga in a number of different forms. So what we're doing is we're taking those forms and trying to wrap a bit of a sense of order around some of them, not all of them. But let me leave you with this. Please read this if you get the chance. I think it will help you. And the short answer, that if you don't remember anything else, just for now, the short answer is that often you can interchange them and still make complete sense to the person you're speaking to. Using wa instead of ga or vice versa is usually not enough to be a deal breaker in conversation, to where other, you can change other words in a sentence and someone will say, huh? What? I don't know what you're saying. Wa and ga, usually you can switch these out and you'll still be okay. There's obviously ones that are more appropriate depending on the situation. And that's part two, is that whenever you have someone say, which one is, why do you use wa, or do you use wa or ga here? Like I see it as wa, and then I also see it as ga. Which one's right? And the answer is they're both right depending on the context, most of the time. But when you see this sentence and, this is the first one that's in that forum, kare wa oishii yo. And its complement, kare ga oishii yo. These are both accurate. Excuse me. It's just that when you look in a single, when you look in a single sentence, again, you lack context. You can't see what was said. Was there a question that came before this? Is this an answer to a question? Or is this someone bringing this up as a topic? And without seeing that, it's harder to say which one is correct. And so the answer is usually they're both correct. It's when you get into conversations, question, answer, back and forth, where one becomes more accurate and one becomes less accurate. But you're going to make mistakes with it. That's fine. You'll make mistakes and the other person will still understand you. They'll still be willing to talk to you. So don't let wa and ga be something that makes you stop speaking and think about, oh, which one do I use here? If you don't know, just throw one out and you will be okay. Fluency in a language is not technical accuracy. Fluency in language is being able to get your thought across to the other person. And mistaking a wa for a ga is not going to stop that. I hope this helps you. If you need to look at this video again, and you're here in our Discord right now, these are in our Discord. It's in the server events channel. It's near the top of the top of the list. We can also go through, if you go up to resources in your menu and go to Japanese lessons, then here's all the lessons that we have. We get more every month. And all the ones that have the little video icon, you can tap on those to view the video. And sooner than later, we'll get a new little icon right here next to the one we did today. And so you can take your time and look at this more slowly if you need to. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you in the next lesson. Bye.